Hello. Firstly, I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me to speak at this meeting. Today, I'm going to give you some insight into the Australian poultry industry's perspective on animal biotechnology applications. But before I get started, I thought I would share the wonderful part of the world that I live in. Given the current pandemic, the best way any of us can hope to do travel is definitely virtually. So here you'll see a map of Australia, and you'll see a nice big red oval circling a place called Armidale. Armidale is located about 5 hours from Sydney, and it is a wonderful rural town. Poultry Hub Australia is located on university grounds, being the University of New England. It's a great rural setting with excellent sporting facilities, as you can see in this photograph. It's a city of just over 26,000 people, and it has fantastic colour in autumn, spectacular waterfalls, and that's mainly due to the fact that Armidale is the highest city in Australia. So hopefully one day you will be able to visit. So I work for an organisation called Poultry Hub Australia. We're an industry-focused organisation that is supported by industry to deliver what they need. We liaise with all sectors and all levels of the industry. This ensures that we have an especially deep understanding of industry needs. Specifically, we have three main focus areas: research, education, and training. Our research objectives are to ensure that we support research that has impact in industry, translation and adoption, and every single research project has to work directly with an industry partner. Our education portfolio aims to build capacity in the industry and knowledge of the industry. And finally, our training portfolio. Here we aim to provide career pathways into industry, increase skills, and consequently, we develop a whole range of different trainings at different levels. What this means is that we have a deep understanding of industry needs. But I will say a lot of what we do is predominantly in an Australian context. It's important to note that in Australia, we don't import any chicken products. So what that means is that we're a closed market, and we've been able to have the Australian market closed due to biosecurity concerns. So while we have a number of issues that are Australian focused, the majority of issues that we have are common to the global poultry industry. We have strong international networks, and that helps us to ensure that the issues that we investigate have both a domestic and international context. We have strong relationship with farmers, leaders of fully integrated poultry businesses, government, welfare groups, and also suppliers and supermarkets. This means we have a much better hold on the entire industry, and it enables us to ensure that we understand the needs and priorities of the industry. So where do genetics and biotechnology fit? Well, we've seen biotech have many impacts in things such as vaccines, therapeutics, and more recently gut biology. Gut health in particular is a major concern and interest to the Australian poultry industry. However, even with some of the amazing advances in biotech in these areas, direct intervention on the genome just hasn't been seen. We know that genetics in performance and health is a really big issue, and pretty much the majority of that resides in the global genetics companies. So for Australia, we do import the genetics from the main companies overseas, and there's very little work done on genetics and breeding within Australia. There are, however, a few niche breeders who are looking at things such as dual-purpose birds, or even looking at Indigenous poultry breeding. However, these are niche breeding exercises and aren't of big concern for the entire industry. So what is the role for genetic biotechnology in the industry here in Australia? Well, I'm sure you're familiar with this graphic, and I think it's a wonderful example of where traditional breeding techniques can get us. However, recessive deleterious traits are still a problem, and particularly when we consider health and welfare traits. Currently, we deal with these by using sophisticated, albeit traditional, breeding practices. But there are other issues that just can't be bred for, such as sex selection and disease resistance, particularly to newly emerging pathogens. Tools such as gene editing for the removal of recessive traits certainly presents potential benefits to overcome some of these issues. Gene editing has the potential to provide disease resistance or resilience and offers great benefit. For example, we've recently had outbreaks of new emerging disease in a number of free-range farms. Unfortunately, due to the persistence of this emerging pathogen, 90% of those infected farms have had to completely shut down. Imagine a bird that could be quickly generated that was resistant to this new pathogen. This would have solved the problem, and it would have prevented the farms from closing. So it's not hard to start and do the figures and realise that there's a real potential return on investment for this type of technology. Some of the other issues that we face include male chick culling in the egg industry. Imagine if we had breeding that only produced female offspring, or a way to detect males when the egg has just been laid prior to hatching. These types of tools or opportunities would be great for the industry. The list of potential applications in the industry goes on, but unfortunately I only have 10 minutes. So you may ask, if it's all so wonderful, why aren't the Australian poultry producers lining up to use this technology? Well, good question. Currently in Australia, this technology is extremely limited. Why? Again, good question. And there's a multitude of possible reasons. And I would say that most likely the reason is multifactorial. Some of the reasons are the willingness of those global genetics companies to incorporate this technology in their breeding systems, association with the tech readiness and the integration into current business practice. Possible. I actually think this is unlikely in Australia, because as soon as people can see the return on investment, it will be easy to justify. Maybe it's the uncertainty of regulation and the multi-jurisdictional nature of their business. Or maybe it's the simple thought of, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Keep in mind, Australia is still using antibiotic growth promotants in the majority of systems. What about the receptiveness of the end user, the consumer? How about the supermarkets? Is this driven by supermarket monopolies? And at the end of the day, farmers are at the mercy of sales. Consumer attitudes, perception of safety. How can we combat some of these problems? I truly believe that if we can tackle some of the harder things such as regulation and labelling, we will go some way to combating this problem. This will have flow-on effects for how we can label of goods, how we can market them, how the companies can get a place in the market. But what is the cost for this genetics? What is the cost to companies, producers and retailers? And is this cost a big barrier to adoption? I wanted to focus in on one particular area, and that is there is an increasing need in Australia to stop the practice of male chick culling on day of hatch for the egg industry. The Australian industry is actively looking at alternatives, but what will be accepted by the consumer and also the industry? There are technologies currently now that people can use to identify the male at day 18 of incubation. However, in my mind, I think that's very risky. I can see the abortion news flash in my head right now. Proposals for use of marker gene on the male phenotype might be something else that are really needed and could have a great impact in the industry. But when we look at some of these technologies, we need to ask ourselves, are the retailers and the public ready? Given this is not being called out as a major welfare in the industry yet. In announcing some of these technologies, are we actually going to highlight a problem that the industry isn't ready to deal with? So what can we do next? Well, in my mind, we need to do two things. We need to look at regulation. How is this technology going to be regulated? How is the work going to be characterised? Regulation and characterisation will be key to making sure that this gets released. The last thing we want is some of those disturbing images that were released back when the Flavour Saver tomato came out. I suggest we get all the hard work done first. Then the industry will be more receptive to uptake of new animal biotechnology advances. Ask yourself, are the industry value points or the drivers strong enough? Are some of these barriers, such as costs and brand reputation, too high? Who's going to pay for the regulation? In Australia, it's really not going to happen until it happens more globally. Unfortunately, we're not going to be the first. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of the supporters of Poultry Hub. Without the wonderful businesses listed on your screen, we would not be able to operate. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions. Thank you.